Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Horne. And today, to everyone who's listening, we're going to dive right into the challenges and opportunities of scaling organizations, energizing teams, building strategic HR practices that actually work. So I know this is at the intersection of so many of our listeners' interests. And our guest today, he's somebody who's been at the forefront of these conversations for are decades now. So let me introduce Andrew Bartlow, seasoned HR executive with over 30 years of experience helping organizations navigate the complexities of growth and change. He's the CEO of People Leader Accelerator, founder of Series B Consulting, and co-author of Scaling for Success, People Priorities for High Growth Organizations. Andrew has worked with companies like Stripes, Samsara, Unilever, and um, he's here in part to share his insights on how leaders can build sustainable, high-performing teams. And I'm going to keep some of the focus on human resources, since I know so many of you are either people and culture leaders, or you're in HR consulting, or you work in the HR field. So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Mike, really nice to be with you. Thanks so much for the kind introduction.
You're welcome. And quite kind of you to join us once again. So you've been an advisor. You've worked for some of the bigger, I want to say VC firms. So you've seen a lot of companies through rapid growth, and you've looked at it particularly through a lens of human resources, given some of your experience. What do you see as the, most common challenges organizations face as they scale? Is it a talent issue? Is it a capital issue? Is it some combination of all of those things? What are your views on scaling?
Yeah, well, there are a lot. So I wrote a book on it, Scaling for Success. There's a lot there. You try to really narrow it down. Things change. Things change with growth. With growth, the complexity increases exponentially, not linearly. And for example, if you go from a company of 10 people to a company of 25 or 50, the interactions there, the complexity of who does what and what's important and what do I spend time and money on, that gets massively harder to manage, to provide clarity, to provide alignment, to get the stuff done that the org needs to get done. So I'd say complexity is the challenge, and clarity tends to be the answer.
Well, that's good. I mean, if you can help people get to clarity, it's certainly helps to, I think, accelerate a pathway for change. I love what you're talking about in terms of scale. I think about some of fun work that I had in human resources was always related to scale, whether it was when I was head of organization development at Marriott International and the company was going to double in size within a certain period of time. So thinking through all the implications with the executive team about that and the strategy folks in the organization. A lot of fun. Thinking about my experiences at Brocade, a company that was a tech veteran for like 28 or 30 years, dismantled, spun off into scaling the other way, spun off into lots of different pieces. So I think these scale projects they condense. That's where you can earn your HR PhD if you want, I think, in these issues of scale. And somehow you've sustained a lot of interest on this. But I think for a lot of people, it just wears them out. But so, what drives your interest in this, Andrew?
Boy, in scaling, I actually think about my primary interest now and for the past 5 to 7 years as supporting other HR professionals. And often those HR professionals that need and deserve the most support are those HR pros that are the only or one of the only leaders in their function in their org. So that tends to be small, fast growing, venture backed, PE backed organizations where there's nobody else to turn to
Right.
in your function. So supporting them and thereby supporting their organizations is the way that I try to support growth more broadly.
And it's interesting too, because I think what you've also said that what works for a small founding team won't work as headcount grows. And and I both know, I mean, in Silicon Valley and the biotech growth regions of the Bay Area, there are lots of small entrepreneurial companies that are go through growth spurts. So how do leaders need to adapt their approaches as teams scale? Should they, as I coached one executive, coached him out because his skill, he really didn't have the skill set any longer to guide where the organization was going financially. And to see another executive, a scientist who led a team of 13 or 14 very well, but couldn't scale into a global pharmaceutical giant. So, what do you see as the keys to adapting approaches as teams scale?
Yeah, I think it starts with awareness. Like
Mm.
any good 12-step program starts with step
Ah,
1, which is admitting there might be a problem. And so the awareness, and this is a Marshall Goldsmith quote, what
uh,
got you here won't get you there.
uh,
He talks about it in a slightly different framework around, skills and approaches, but the same goes for organizations. And that means that let's be specific. Being fast and scrappy often also means being chaotic, but that's what you need to get an organization off the ground. That sort of animal spirit of entrepreneurship. And I've started a few of my own things along the way. And so I can really empathize with that. But then that changes when you have a team, when there are other people that are trying to get work done and be supportive and frankly protect and enhance their own income. So when you add more people to the mix, things change. And again, that exponentially increases. So I would start with just being aware that things change as you grow is one of the most important things. So actually I'll add a little bit more to that. There's this real danger of lifting and shifting best practices from some giant famous company. I think of Jim Collins and his book Good to Great, and how many of those companies now 15 years later are considered great in any way. Not many. And boy, here in the Silicon Valley area, I hear about all of Google's people practices and what so and so did. And boy, Zappos was doing holacracy back in the day, and they were successful, and everybody wanted to do that. There is a danger in copying without context. If there's some giant organization that's massively profitable that has tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, instead of default thinking that what they do will work for your little startup, you should default think that what they do will kill your little startup because the context is so massively different.
yeah, so true. I was thinking about the issues of scale and a few of the executives who with whom I've interacted. One at one of the early biotech companies, Art Levinson, who was often asked, what happens to the culture of an organization um, when it's 500 people versus when it's 500 people. And that organization grew into about, I don't know, 12, 15,000 until it was acquired more formally by Roche and then grew exponentially in some ways. Another executive who saw growth, but in a different way. So, what goes on for HR? Because at times, HR is the furthest thing from an executive's mind, and yet it's such an important component of running a business. And how do you help with that transition or that trigger?
Yeah, I think I'd suggest that the highest and best use of an HR leader in most environments, whether you're big, small, or in between, is clearly articulating and then disseminating throughout the organization what the most important goals, priorities, and initiatives are. And that drives clarity and that drives alignment. And that maybe you have the resources to have an internal communications person. Most organizations don't have that. And the HR leader is actually the best positioned to do that.
Right.
So in massive growth, there tends to be massive change. And so you can be that aligning force that translates these financial goals or these investor targets into activities and initiatives that people can understand and people can get behind. And you know what the express trains are, and you know what the local trains are, and you know how ties are broken. And that helps an organization be a heck of a lot more effective. So it's it's not about some magical list of HR projects and initiatives all good orgs do. That's a trap. Don't get stuck doing this, imaginary checklist. But really foundationally, especially in times of growth and change, is driving clarity.
Yes. And I think this is so true in terms of driving clarity. And there may be one other item is get the payroll straight.
Yeah.
Because whether you think that's, people equate that as an HR issue. And I think that's one of the lessons I learned in the tech environment is that, that has to be straight every 2 weeks or
Right. That's
whatever
right.
the frequency is. So, thinking about that and what has to be right, you've seen enough now, from dot-com crashes to pandemic shutdown, what to all kinds of things. Now some people say we have some of the greatest disengagement in the United States since 2014 or sometime. I mean, what are the lessons from all of these transition points, these pivot points that you've seen, Andrew, to what's relevant to leaders today?
Yeah. You know what? I think I'll take a controversial stand on this. We chase bright, shiny objects far too often. We attend webinars and read the articles about what's hot and new in HR. But what tends to really matter are the boring basics, the fundamentals of like, what are we doing to try to increase revenue, reduce costs, accelerate the product roadmap? And the more closely we can align our activities and articulate how it really matters, the more effective we are as HR professionals and the more successful our organizations are. Like my strong encouragement to the HR pros that are listening to this episode and listening to me is like be brilliant at the basics rather than continuing to chase whatever's hot and new. Now, does that mean that we should ignore AI? Of course not. It's a great tool. But let's not spend all of our calories and all of our time and all of our brain cells like playing with it. Let's find where it can be useful and use it to accelerate us forward on the basics. What are we doing to drive revenue? What are we doing to control costs and increase productivity? How are we accelerating our product roadmap? If we can do those things, we will see through whatever the next crisis will be.
Yeah, it is really, in some ways, what I hear you saying, Andrew. It's focus on the basics of a business around driving, building revenues, ensuring wealth and profitability for the firm so that it can grow. So, one of the worst pieces of advice, and I think it's one of the pieces of advice that's frequently given to people, whether they're in HR or aspiring to leadership positions in other disciplines, is just you need to be more strategic. I don't think it's often clear. Well, certainly it's not because it's not in a behavioral lens. But in HR, today, here we are. What does it mean to be strategic?
My goodness, thank you for asking that question. Like this is one of my favorite topics, and this I think is one of the biggest ways that a human resources professional can elevate and accelerate their career is to better understand and articulate and operate in a more strategic way. And we're not doing ourselves any favors by hand wavy comments like seat at the table and business partner and be strategic unless we can peel it back and more clearly understand ourselves, like start there, understand ourselves with how and where we can add value. Because Mike, you know this, the CEOs, COOs, CFOs that we work for and work with don't often know what good looks like in the HR role. So they'll say be strategic, but they won't necessarily be able to solve the equation to say exactly what it is that we should be doing. So here's my definition of being strategic: identifying the right things to work on. That's that simple. Like tactical is how you do it. Strategic is deciding proactively based upon your knowledge of the organization, the environment, its goals, what the most powerful, impactful things would be to work on. That's not just being responsive, reactive, taking orders, whatever the employees want, whatever some executive asks you to do. It's being a leader and diagnosing, like a physician, diagnosing here is the issue and here is the remedy. Be strategic, decide what to work on. And often that's doing something in the people space to help increase revenue, reduce costs, increase productivity, expand geographically. And so that could be Again, instead of this imaginary list of HR initiatives and projects that all good orgs and all good functions will do, it is being tailored to what your org needs right now. So maybe that's increasing the percentage of sales reps that hit quota. How can we do that? Maybe that's training and onboarding. Maybe that's manager skills on the sales team. Being specific about where you can add the most value is being strategic.
Yeah, and it certainly seems that, Andrew, you're pointing to the distinction between being an HR technician and an HR leader. I mean, with this difference of, knowing the right things to work on. HR in many ways functions on interruption time. There's often some crisis, real imagined but created. And you provide better counsel and guidance to an executive and earn his, her, or their confidence when you're able to practice discernment. And that, for me, that's what shaped, I think, situations where I was successful, knowing like what's work and what's not work, because there's always work. So
Yeah.
it's really another way of thinking about focusing on the right things. And the other elements that I would bring are a sense of hope. It isn't as bad as we might think it is. Could be worse. And a sense of presence so that you can use yourself in a situation to its maximal effectiveness.
That's fair. Agreed. We have a lot of
Yeah.
stakeholders and they all want something from us. And so our opportunity is to try to elevate a bit, look around, and figure out where the biggest need and the biggest opportunity really is using that discernment that you're talking about.
Yeah. So great. Let's just talk about your book. And, as we begin to think about wrapping up, but well, I do want to talk about scaling for success. It's really a practical toolkit for leaders in many ways. And if there was one key takeaway from the book that you hope every reader remembers, what might that be?
Oh my goodness, my
I'm
200
always grateful when people get through the
pages with
first 10.
footnotes and all that. Like, can I
Yeah.
boil it down to one thing? I,
Yeah.
um, I'd say have a plan. Have a lightweight, flexible, adaptable plan. But if you are trying to successfully scale, understand where you're going, clearly articulate that, and provide some guidance, some clarity on how you expect to get there. Have a plan.
That's great. Yeah. And that process of planning can be everything as the
Oh,
plan
yeah.
of change. It's one of the things I always think Dwight Eisenhower said. I think planning is everything, the plan is nothing. I mean, it's ways that hold that construct that you have about having a plan as truth.
There's a Mike Tyson quote to that as well, I think.
Oh, wow, that's great. I didn't know that. That's great.
Everybody has a plan until you're punched in the face is something like that.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right. Oh, that's great. Andrew, if people want to learn more about your work and get a copy of your book, where can our listeners learn more about your work and find out about the book?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, the book is Scaling for Success. There's a website specifically for that book. You can get it on Amazon and Kindle and Audible and all that good stuff. Columbia University, you can buy it through their website or Amazon, or go to the scalingforsuccessbook.com website. As for me, I am noisy on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posting, do a lot of sharing. Go ahead and follow me. I won't spam you too much. And my business is People Leader Accelerator, and that business, which frankly is more of a passion project, is really about helping other HR leaders. So check out peopleleaderaccelerator.com, and maybe there's some way that I could help your listeners.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate your kindness and your generosity in that regard, Andrew Bartlow. It's been great to have you as a guest today. If I was to summarize, I was reflecting, for me, you reminded me, and I hope our listeners, that scaling isn't just about growth. It's about evolving how we communicate, what we prioritize, and how we lead. And I really appreciate your insights, Andrew, on strategy, tailoring HR practices, because organizations have unique properties. And it's not just something you can, we said, lift and shift. I think earlier in the podcast. So in terms of, what makes your culture unique, you're offering a real roadmap for leaders looking to build sustainable success. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining.
My
And
pleasure. Thank you.
it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. You'll see all the places where Andrew talked about in the show notes. So, I encourage you to follow him. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to subscribe to the People Dividend Podcast, leave a review, and tune into another episode. Appreciate all of that. So until the next episode of the People Dividend Podcast, stay well.